As Lars said, obviously I'm an American. My parents are from here. So my mother is from just east of here, and my father is from just north of here. They came over to the U.S. just before I was born. So I speak a little bit of Polish for those of you that are Polish, and some of you I've already interacted with. I am not a church leader. I am not presenting this in the manner of a church leader. I am presenting this in the matter of, here is what's happening with social media across the globe. We do work both in the U.S. as well as in the UK. We have an office in the UK and an office here in Poland. So we cover basically most of the globe. So these are very common. The other thing I will tell you is that we will not get through the entire slide deck. So we won't get through every bullet point on your notes, and it won't matter. You can have the slide deck. As of right now, it's already on my blog at stevelowisz.com/ELF2013. You can download it anytime that you want. I do keep getting asked one question, though. And the question keeps coming up of, how did I come to faith? And that was 23 years ago. And I'll just say this. It was my wife who brought me to faith. And it was before we were married. The typical American, I already had a girlfriend at the time when I asked my wife out on a date. And my wife was smart enough, having been saved, to say, sure, but I have two conditions. One, break up with the other girl. Two, go to church with me. 3 months later, I was saved. Less than 6 months later, we were married. And that was 23 years ago. So my daughter is here, little blonde about this big, Lauren, if any of you have seen her. She's one of the volunteers, also doing some of the cameras. So we tried to bring the whole family, but we couldn't. So let me ask a question. How many of you have Facebook? Twitter? LinkedIn? That's kind of what I thought. How many of you use Facebook regularly? What do you use it for? Communication? Photos. Number one use is actually photos. What else? Networking with who?
Colleagues and other Christians.
Doing what with them?
See what's going on and talk about upcoming projects and practices.
So what about your organizations? How many of your organizations are using it? What are you using it for? So we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. What else are you using it for? Why do you link it to other similar projects? Advertising. So we've got to be careful with advertising. Most organizations, that's their focus, is advertising. That's not what the focus of social media is. It's a byproduct of social media. If you use it as a tool just to advertise, it becomes ineffective. And we'll look at some of those things. So the title of this is Online Communication and Building Awareness. The original title was Building a Brand. And I was warned that here in Europe, you don't use the term brand. Or do you? Okay. So I kept it anyways. Because when I talk about online communication and building awareness, in definition, it's about building a brand. It's whatever your organization, your mission is, in my case, a company, it's about helping build a brand for what we stand for, what we're about, and what value can we provide back to our customers, in your case, the people that you want to attend your church, your organization, whatever it might be. So I'm going to refer and use brand a lot, but I want to define it first. What is a brand? How do you define a brand? Since you use it here, I'm going to ask the question. Your reputation of your product. Sure, what else? What else defines a brand? Come on, if you're using it, it's a name. Oh! Yeah, there's a couple of different things about a brand that we've got to understand. That it's a little bit too dark, but this is your face to the world. This is what people see about you, right? So it starts off with a name. So here, the European Leadership Forum, or the new website, Focal, FOCL.com, Focal Online, or whatever it is. It starts with the name. But then there has to be a logo behind it, because this is the living piece of who you are. For any organization, whether it's a church movement, whether it's a company, these are all tied together. You cannot separate them. And the reason it's important is because when you go out to social media, it has to be able to support your brand somehow. Following me so far? Yes? Okay, because we'll keep going through this. But here's the interesting piece. It's how we're perceived and what people say. So I don't know your name, but you had commented about what the media says potentially negative. Your brand is neutral. We've got to understand that. Your brand could be negative and positive at the same time. But brand itself is neutral. It's everyone else's perception of your organization, right? Is that fair? And you've experienced that. Oh yes, yeah. It's if you're going to brand a cow, it's the mark. It's the mark that's left. It's 100% perception. The media is all about perception, right? Positive or negative. We want to tell the truth. We're going to tell the truth. But the reality of it is our enemies or somebody who doesn't like what we're doing, right, is going to have a different perception of us. And one of the comments that I made in Sunday that I don't have in here, but I'll make it, there are inherent risks associated with branding, social media, marketing, and being any type of leader in an organization. Think about it. If you're going to go out there and you're going to talk about whatever it is, your product, your service, or your messages, you have to be prepared. One of the things you need to do is be prepared for somebody to say something different and to argue with you and to try to take you down. So don't be surprised when using social media that you start getting naysayers. Expect it. The issue is you need to be prepared for it, to engage them, not in a negative manner, but to still have some of those conversations with them. So how do you define social media? Now, those of you that were Sunday in my session, you got to be quiet. How do you define social media? What do you consider social media? Media to engage with other people. So give me some options. Facebook, we already mentioned. How else do you define it? You're using it. What else are you using? We got that one. LinkedIn, some of you. What else are you using? YouTube. How are you using YouTube?
Putting videos up from what I'm doing when I'm around the world.
For the purposes of what?
So my family and friends can see what I'm doing.
Okay. What about organizations? Are you using videos? What are you using it for? Informing who? I keep asking the what, the how. I'll put this together in a little bit here because you always have to be asking the question, what are you trying to do? So just to be on Facebook for the sake of being on Facebook for your organization is not a really good idea. You won't be effective with it. What are you trying to do? Who are you trying to communicate to? And what do they need? So like the forum here. I don't know how many times I've heard Greg Pritchard say, what does God have on your heart and what can we do for you? You've got to be thinking about it in kind of a reverse fashion, right? It's here's our mission, here's what we want to do with it, here's our demographic of who we're going after, believers, non-believers. What do they need? Because just putting stuff up that you like doesn't necessarily mean people like it. Does that make sense? And we often don't ask that question of what do they need, what do they want? We have to be prepared to ask that actual question. So this is how media used to be. And I use the term Web 1.0 on Sunday, but media used to be one way. There was a sender and there was a receiver, right? Makes sense? What happened with social media or mass media? Either one. You still have a sender. Now what? Yeah, there's multiple receivers. What happens with social media? What happens to this? Yeah, it's very different. Now we're all participants. It's not just a sender and sending out to receivers, because the idea is it's going to get shared. Now we're all participants in this together, so when we look at using social media as a tool, we can't look at it just as, let's send out information. It's great to send out content, but it's got to be content that matters to these individuals because we all become participants. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's ask this question. Why do we care? Why is this topic of social media even important to you? Why are you sitting in this room? It's how people are communicating. What else? What's that? Quickly, real time. What else? You want to convey your message. We get more out of. But why do you use it? Why do you care about it?
Because now I'm using Facebook for others, but can I use it more effectively? That's what I want to know.
Yes. So we'll talk about how to use it actually more effectively. So in today's day and age, let's think about the younger generation. There's some of you here, and my daughter's a prime example. It's not about one static websites that just have content and there's no way to communicate back and forth. Do you think that attracts them? No. It's two-way communication now. It's relationship building that traditional websites didn't have. Social media was born because of that, to try to get that two-way interaction. Now, unfortunately, we all have to understand there are negatives to social media. And one of them is the fact that all they want to do now is this. They want to type everything back and forth to each other. So two-way communication has become electronically driven. So you and I can't have a conversation because I don't know how to talk to you because all I've been doing is this with you. That's the negative of it. But there's some significant reasons that we want to keep using it. The real time that you mentioned. You can communicate in real time and they love that. But here's one of the interesting things. And I use the term competitors loosely. Your competitors are doing it. And look at it from this perspective. And this is the only piece that I'll interject something that I think about all the time that is more biblically based, I guess. Think about all of the media that you're seeing every day online from non-Christian organizations. There's study after study after study says that is shaping the view of our younger generation and many of our older generation that are using it quite a bit. If they're already using it and they're already planting that seed, how do you combat that? You have to do something to try to shift that worldview. Am I correct? So if it's already being done, it's not follow the leader. That's not what I'm talking about. But it's about combating the information that's out there. In the business world, my competitors are doing it, so I need to make sure I'm doing it as well. And I need to make sure I'm doing it better because that's where everybody's going for the information and communication. Does that make sense? The other thing, there's a lot of applications here. There's a great application in the business world. With the advent of social media, it allows me to communicate to many, right? But used correctly, it allows me to bring that relationship back one-to-one. So it's one-to-many to start, and then it allows me to come back one-to-one if I use it. So I can engage. First, I can send out a question, and I'll get to that in a second. I can get responses. Now you and I are communicating one-to-one. Whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, doesn't really make a difference. That's the purpose of social media. It's not just throwing out content. It's gaining interest, building trust, and then being able to communicate back one-to-one. It's not to replace all forms of relationship and communication. It's to drive it. It's to drive greater numbers. Does that perspective make sense? Is it different than maybe the perspective that you were using social media for? I find most, some no, some yes. I find most that use it for their personal use. We're posting pictures of our grandkids or whatever it might be. It's very, very different use than when we talk about using it for an organization, a mission, or whatever it might be. Studies have shown that people don't go to the phone anymore. They go online. They know more about your organization sometimes than what you know about them based on what they hear online. I'm not talking physically here on the phone. In fact, there's an interesting study. Well, we'll go back. 62% of the world population is on some form of social media. 88% of internet users use it to test or to look on an organization before they buy it, before they go to the event, before they subscribe, or whatever the case is. We cannot walk away from social media. Can we agree on that part at least? Anybody disagree? Feel free. This is the place to do it. We can't walk away. It's so big. Makes sense? All right. Demographically, this is making a difference too. You know, we talk about the younger generation and saying, well, they don't know how to communicate anymore, so we have to use social media for them. Do we know why they don't communicate as well? I'm at fault with my daughter, and if you have kids, there's a potential you're at fault because it's what we've given them to communicate. I was crazy enough to give my 19-year-old daughter an iPhone the first year they came out. She was much smaller back then. So I precipitated that. But the way people communicated generation to generation to generation has been very different. When you look at the older generation, it was still about, let's talk on the phone. I would prefer to talk one-to-one. But this is starting to change drastically. Now it's changing much faster. Because we went to the baby boomer generation, and there was still on the phone, but it was a little bit less formal. And as we go through the generations, Gen X, where I am, that was when you had the mobile phones that were like a big brick. That was the generation I grew up in initially. And now you've got, if you don't have an iPhone or an Android or something else, and now the reality of it is email's too slow. Especially here in Europe, kids love chat, instant chat. Because email too slow? Could you have thought about that 5 years ago, that email was going to be too slow? Because you can't wait 12 seconds? You need it instantly, iMessage, where you can watch them as they're typing it. You can see that they're typing it. Same with Facebook chat. Talking about a microwave society. And it's not just America, it's here. What's going to happen next, I don't know, but I love this little picture. See the guy sitting on the question mark with his hands on his head saying, I don't know what's coming next. Because it's going to get worse. We've already seen some technologies that will be introduced soon. They're in alpha and beta stage that could potentially give Facebook a run for their money. If it catches on. That's always the question, right? If it catches on. But communication is going to continue to get more interesting as a result of some of what's going on with all the social media. But we've created some of that as parents, unfortunately, when we allow our kids to communicate only on cell phones, text-wise, as opposed to picking up the phone. Now, don't tell my daughter I told you this story, but I'll just give you one quick perspective that helps. She was younger. She was 16 years old, had just gotten her car. And I travel a lot. And her mother called me on a Thursday night and said, Lauren did this. And it wasn't a big thing, but I do believe in punishment. So I said, okay, the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the internet and the text off on her phone. I'm going to leave the phone on because she has a car and I want, in case there's an emergency, I want her to be able to call somebody. Friday I get home and she's home. 16-year-old girl in America with her own car, not grounded. She can go wherever she wants. She's home. So as I walk in the door, I said, why are you here? And she's kind of looking at me. I said, what are all your friends doing? She said, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? Pick up the phone and call them. And she looked at me as serious as could be and said, oh, Dad, we don't do that. I had turned the text and the internet off so she couldn't communicate with her friends. This was 3 years ago. That's just, it's unfortunately, we can joke about it, but it's a sorry state of how some folks communicate and one of the negatives that social media draws in. But we can still use it for positives. So when you look at organizations, there's a number of different reasons they use social media and what they use it for. And it's important to understand there's so many different things. Here's the thing to keep in mind. Here's kind of the process to keep in mind, and then we'll look at some of these individually. The first thing around building social media, and I talked about this on Sunday, is that awareness, building that brand. You want to be able to do that, right? Get it out there that this is who we are and so forth. But you got to have a reason as to why you're doing that. You want to be sending out information that's interesting to people so they begin to trust you. That's really what you end up doing. By sending out information that's relevant to them, they begin to trust your brand a little bit more. Now, if they trust your brand a little bit more, what can you do? If they trust your brand, whether it's an organization, a church, what position does that put you in, potentially? If you can get them to trust your brand because you send them information that they think is important, not that you think is important, you start to be able to have influence over them. You can use social media, just like any other media, to influence habits of individuals. If you have influence over them, it starts to drive traffic. Traffic turns into followers. That's really it. So we'll hit a couple of these. One is create buzz. And I just mentioned that, right? Got all the bees. See the metaphor here? Anyways. But that's why most people use it. They want to create buzz around a specific event or whatever it might be. It's much broader than that, though. But that's the number one reason we use social media, to try to get the word out about our organization. But there's more to it than that. That two-way communication, that quick follow-up, obviously, that's a big plus. This loyalty issue, because you keep sending them information that's important to them. Now, I've said that about 4 times right now. Sending them information that's important to them where they are today. Do we ever ask those that we're going to send information to, what's important to them. Or are we posting, I'm having a cheeseburger downstairs? Content needs to be relevant to the individual or individuals or demographic receiving it. Otherwise, social media is not effective. Yeah. So they are once they're a friend of yours. But in the business world, we call customers. I know you don't call the mission field customers. You can't. But let's put it in the same perspective, right? In the business world, they're called customers. You have to get them in first. Once I've got them and they have some trust in me, now I can post about that burger and they'll probably comment on it. But if they don't know who I am and I'm not sending out information that's relevant to them, they'll never want to look at your burger because they don't know you and they don't trust you. That's the difference when you introduce things like that. Because Facebook in particular is mostly used as a personal network, there's so much noise. So much noise. You're absolutely right. And think about it from a company or an organization perspective. And I said this on Sunday as well. You're competing with pictures of somebody's grandkids because that's primarily what it's used for. So you've got to have content that's more important than a grandmother or grandfather's grandkids. That's tough. Now, once you get them in, you can post about your burger. Does that make sense? It's not an easy thing to do. And that's what I'm trying to point out here, is we can't go into social media and say, let's do this, let's do Twitter, let's do Facebook, let's do all this until we understand what's going on, why we use it, and then take a step back and say, how do we make those two work together within our organization? It's not easy. And I can't give you a do this, do this, do this, do this, because it's different for every organization, because the people you're trying to reach, whether it's a company like mine or whatever it is for you, they're different. They have different drivers. They have different motivators. Does that make sense? Any other comments on that? Okay. SEO. Who knows what SEO is? Have you heard the term search engine optimization? Yeah. When you go on Google, how many of you have not used Google? Okay. When you go on Google and you put in a search term, and your results come up, you have a tendency to look at the first page. Very few people go beyond a page and a half, right? How do those companies or those organizations or those things get to the top? So you want to be at the top. So if you put in a search, you want to be the first one that comes up. So if I put in gospel, I want Lars's picture to be the first one. And we could do that, by the way. Anyways. But that's what you want to be able to do. How do organizations do that? There's a couple of different ways. One is built right into the website, but it's all called search engine optimization. And there's keywords and there's all kinds of things you can do in the website. But social media plays right into SEO. Because using it correctly, and I'll show you a model here in just a minute, using it correctly, it actually, when you look at Google, when you look at Bing, when you look at Yahoo, it actually increases your exposure on the natural search algorithms that they have. The way they search, it'll find your content faster than it'll find somebody else's, and it'll raise it to the top. That's important if somebody's going online who's a seeker, whatever information they're looking for your information to bubble up to the top. And I'll show you how that works with social media. This is a critical tool. This drives, in many instances, much more than any of the SEO somebody does in a website, with all the meta tags and everything else. We won't get into the technology side of it. But SEO is a big application for this. Networking in general, this is what we tend to do from a friend's perspective. Not a big deal. Thought leadership is another important piece. Somebody like Oz. Does Oz have a Facebook page, Guinness? And Twitter and everything? He doesn't? Okay. Okay, I don't know. But somebody who is already seen as a thought leader, like an Oz, for example. So in my business, in HR consulting and social media and so forth, there are certain terms and so on that I want to be known for. So I speak on them. I talk about them. And we get that information out there. It makes us look like we know what we're talking about, so people instantly have that attraction and trust in us. The problem, again, is those that don't know what they're talking about and spending a lot on marketing do a really good job of it, so you have a natural tendency to go to somebody who really doesn't know what they're talking about. But you can use social media because of what you send out, because it's important to the community that you're sending it out to be thought as the thought leader, so they'll start to engage with you more. Not just, again, sending out, I'm having a cheeseburger, or, hey, I read this Bible verse. That's it. There's got to be some opinion making. Again, you're opening yourself up to risk. The minute you start doing this, the minute you want to set your organization or yourself individually, or the person that leads your organization as a thought leader, you will open yourself up to risk. Somebody will say something different. Events and promotions, you already mentioned. It's a great tool for that. Tracking, Facebook has a great tracking tool built into it, so you can see who, obviously the invites and who responds and so on. Traffic, I already mentioned. Deepen relationships because of that two-way communication. And this we don't really use it for. This is that word-of-mouth advertising that ultimately social media can become. We have a hard time listening to social media. We do a really good job of telling on social media. I said this on Sunday, listen and then never stop listening. The comment that I always use is, we generally are not very good listeners. We're just waiting to talk. There's a big difference between the two. All of the stuff that's on social media today is, some of it's chatter, some of it's noise, but it'll tell you trends, where people are hurting, what people need, what are the interests. You've got to listen to what's out there in order to give relevant content that somebody actually wants. What better place to go than to the individuals or the populations or those groups? We don't do this well. One of, I keep going back to some of the stuff I told on Sunday, but when I landed, my daughter and I landed in Frankfurt last Wednesday morning. And as soon as I landed, because obviously I'm a social media geek a little bit, I checked in on Foursquare that I'm here. Within 3 minutes, Lufthansa, because I had mentioned Lufthansa, what a great flight, had tweeted back saying, thank you for saying that nice thing about us. A minute later, the Frankfurt airport said, welcome, let us know if we can be assistance, and here's the link. Now, talking about, they were listening when I landed, and now we have this two-way communication going. That's phenomenal because they got to me where I was. No, because they gave me the link to their customer service group so that they wanted to listen to me more if there were any other issues. At some point, you have to do some talking in order to stop and listen. You have to ask a question to stop and listen. And that's kind of what they did. So it wasn't just telling me about, here's all about Lufthansa. The link was, if you have any questions, here's our customer service number. That's listening. Does that make sense? We generally don't use that. We want to tell. We want to tell. And we don't stop to listen. In most instances, when I work with an organization and they say, these are all the things that we're sending out, I'll ask the question, who told you to? They'll say, my boss, whoever that boss might be. You never asked your target population? Oh, no. Well, let's listen. It's so easy with social media to actually listen. Again, this is a little bit dark. So when you look at this social media, internet communication strategy, there's a ton of different ways to actually do this. And one of the pushes for like Facebook and LinkedIn, for those of you that are using LinkedIn, is to make proprietary organizational homepages and build all of your content there as your main website. Okay? I don't recommend that. I recommend using it, but why would I not recommend putting all of your eggs within if you know that expression, all of your eggs in one basket, within LinkedIn or Facebook? There's a couple of reasons. What happens if a new technology comes out and puts Facebook away? Now, the likelihood of that happening with over 1 billion monthly users is slim. I get that. But what happens if they change their policies like they do all the time and it edits your content? Do you have control over that? Not really. Here's the other thing to consider. If we go back to search engine optimization, we want people to see our content on our websites. Search engine optimization doesn't work within Facebook or within LinkedIn. The purpose behind Facebook is to drive traffic to Facebook, not to your website, your webpage on Facebook. LinkedIn actually competes with your website. So if you have I recommend to organizations to have a LinkedIn site. Europe, not so much because it's not used as readily across Europe like it is in the United States and other places. But what we have to understand is they're trying to make it captive. So you have to go through them for everything. Then your social media to drive things like search engine optimization become irrelevant. So when somebody searches you on Google, it's never going to come up. Think about that. So what we always talk about is that currently, now let me preface this by saying this. Everything I tell you today could change tomorrow. So everything that we just went through on Sunday and today, I may come back a year from now, if I'm invited back, and I'm going to tell you something completely different. Why is that? Changes. Technology is changing so unbelievably fast. This is all going to be out of date in about 6 months. So if you're going to do it, you're going to have to do it pretty quick. Not to scare you. But here's the model that we talk about today. This could change based on some of the new technology. Your website should be the hub. So you've got your wheel with all your spokes coming out of it. The website should be the hub that really holds the majority of the content, holds the data, holds all the contact information, and everything else around it should be feeding to your website, which means you have to have the right information and the right content and the right strategy on your website before you even consider going out to social media, because it becomes a waste of time. Social media is free from a dollars perspective. It's not free from a time perspective. The dedicated resources to do it right are expensive. And I've seen too many times where they spend all this time and energy on social media, but everything it's being linked back to in terms of the website doesn't exist. So your homepage should be the center of your wheel. Everything else is around the outside of it, feeding back to the content, feeding back to the information. Now this is in its simplest format. The reason there's all these little spiders going out is because part of the successes of all this is cross-linking that somebody already said to other websites, to other blogs, to all kinds of other things for this to really make it look right. A couple of things before I keep going on this. Consistency is so key. Here's what I mean by consistency. We talked first about brand. First it's your name and then it's your logo, right? Then you have this look and feel of your website and the colors you choose and all these things that are really, really important that drive certain behaviors in consumers. Because there is this marketing aspect, no matter what you're doing online, regardless of the mission, there is a certain level of marketing that has to be done. Okay? Consistency is the key. So if your homepage on your website looks like this with these colors, your homepage on Facebook should look like that with those colors. Your Twitter, Facebook, or your Twitter page, your company page should be the same, or your organizational page. Consistency is key. You have to make it look right in order to keep driving that traffic back. I'm just going to flip through these because I just mentioned this. Match them. So, but you need to ask yourself 3 questions, right? When we're talking about social media, I mentioned this before. Who are you trying to reach? Most of you could probably say, we're trying to reach these individuals, we're trying to reach non-believers, we're trying to reach youth, we're trying to reach whatever it might be, right? The next question is, why are you trying to reach them? What are you trying to do? What's that? It's all different for everybody. And then the third one, what are they interested in? Very few organizations can answer that third one. Whether it's a company, whether it's a church, it doesn't matter. Now we know what they need from the gospel. We know that. But you can't just take the gospel and throw it out in front of somebody and say, be saved. We know that. You have to engage them. You have to build that relationship with them somehow. How do you do that? You have to uncover what they need. And then craft your information, in your case, from a biblical perspective, that is not only what they need, but starts to get the mind working a little bit. Very few of what I've seen out there for any biblically Christian organization does this. They do the first 2 really well, but then it's what they want to send as opposed to what that audience really needs. And they're missing the biggest population that they're trying to go after. And it renders this type of tool relatively useless. Am I making sense? I don't want to get into the subject of marketing the gospel versus not marketing the gospel, seeker-friendly versus not. I'll leave that to people like Lars and Oz and others. I'm not going to get into that. But in theory, I would agree with you because it happens in business. So if we drive them through the front door, as I say, to the comment you just have, but there's nothing there to keep them, they never come back to the site. Even if I change it later, there's a high propensity for them never to return back because it wasn't there the first time. And in this society of instant gratification, you have 1, maybe 2 shots, and then you're done. But I'll let you guys debate the other issue. But from a business perspective, I agree. Now, this is something I also talked about on Sunday that is critically important that will confuse you even more about social media. There's one thing to say, this is what people are using. I'm using Facebook, I'm using Twitter. Here in Poland, it's Nasha Class says number 2, whatever it might be. But how are they using those tools? Think about it. We use Facebook for different reasons. My mother, who's not very technology savvy, may look at a picture if I put it up there of one of her grandkids. She doesn't chat, she doesn't do anything else. So there's different classes of people and how they use social media. So if you're going to do this, you need to understand what these different things are. And they're classified, actually, as different titles. There's what's called this Forster's Ladder of Social Participation that looked at users across the globe to say not only from a demographic or an age perspective, but functionally, what are they using social media for? I know those of you that were here on Sunday, you saw this, but it's important for all the rest of you to understand this, that there's more science to this thing of social media than there is art. Once you understand this. So this is the 6 classifications. First one is creators. What do you think a creator is? Well, the creator would be somebody who's blogging, who creates their own website. They create their own Facebook homepage. That's how they classified a creator. They're pretty technically savvy. They know how to do this stuff, right? The next one was critics. What's a critic? Commenting. Yes, all they're doing all day long is commenting. They review and they comment. They don't blog, but they love to be commenters, and they're generally cynical. Very few of them are ongoing positive. When they actually study this, about 20% of their comments are positive, 80% are negative. It's just where things are today. And then we went to collectors. So if I came to the Focal website and I viewed a video that I didn't agree with, I'll put a comment, yeah, I don't believe in this at all, and you'll never hear from me again. Critics. But now there's that message is there, unfortunately. The thing about critics, though, is it is highly generational focused. So the younger generation are the most critical. The older generation are the most non-critical. I don't have it in here, but if you go to my blog afterwards and download Sunday's presentation and today, there's another chart that actually says here's all these 6 categories, and here's the age groups that it's most prevalent in. It actually shows that for you. That'll give you some sense. Joiners, I'm a joiner. I join every single social media site there is for the purposes of exploration, but all these people do is join, 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 join. They don't post, they don't comment, they don't do anything else. They just join everything. Are you a joiner? Spectators, this is what in American term I'd call a stalker. All they're doing is following people, but they're not commenting. There's none of their own stuff, but they're kind of following from afar. They don't really interact at all, so it's tough to interact with them. And that's actually a pretty big percentage of the population. And then inactives, these are people who have social media accounts, but they really don't use them. And you'll see on that chart, if you download it, it's something like 40% even of the younger generation. It was 27% of the younger generation, 40% of my generation that are inactives. They have social media site accounts, they don't use them. They go on maybe once a year. Yeah. So if you're surfing a lot on the web and you're bookmarking the different sites, you're a collector. That's primarily dig.com or those where you're really just taking all of the websites that you've gone to and you're categorizing them in one form or another. Basically making a library file cabinet is what you're doing. That's a collector. Makes sense? So if one, you've got to understand your demographic and who they are. Two, you got to know what they're interested in. Three, you got to know how they're using social media to connect with them in the first place. Now, have I thoroughly scared you off? My point is in all this, you have to understand this in order to make it effective. Otherwise, you'll spend all this time and money and you won't really get anything. Are you still with me? Well, there's a couple of things specifically about these people. One is how you react to them, right? So we have to first understand that is some of them are so disparaging that you just need to delete them. So if you own that particular domain or what have you, you can just delete their comment.
Maybe a lack of editorial, control that.
There has to be an editorial control. However, let me preface it by, or let me caution you by saying, you don't want to get into censorship because then the free ideas do not come out. However, there's a certain point in which it just becomes so derogatory, so inappropriate that you're better off taking it down completely. So that's one. Two, engaging them in a way that says, interesting point of thought that you don't like this, what is your specific opinion? And trying to tease that out of them is generally the way to be able to do that. Most people, when they do reflect on their own usage, they're going to be a little bit of each of these, is what it's going to come down to. And I even catch myself being here. Because it's very easy to say, I'm not happy with this particular thing, and to be a critic about it. Now I've made a specific focus, like on the Lufthansa flight, to be very positive, because positive draws more comments than the negative. And I actually get to connect with more people every time I post a positive comment. Very few people will connect with me when I post negative comments. So we've got to understand that, to your point, Lars. That's very, very, very critical. It could affect the success or failure of your social media if you're not even doing it appropriately. Kids don't understand this. The younger generation has no idea that this is even being tracked. Now, it's kind of scary out there because we all have what's called a digital footprint. Every place you go, every entry you make, every comment you make can be tracked back to you. Keep that in mind. There is ways to track it back to you. It's the expensive technology, but it happens, and it happens often. In the U.S. government just got in trouble for this because they were applying this technology without a warrant. But they have the technology to follow you wherever you go. Just keep that in mind. So you want to be careful what you're actually posting up there. But overall, this is making sense. Understand there's more to it than just this. I want to hit on a couple of these tools, the Twitter, the Facebook, and so forth, because I think it's important to understand how you tie in those things. If we're going to use that hub and spoke system, how do we tie it in? How do we bring the two together? So if you're out there tweeting something, how do you make it relevant to go back to your website? Do you make it relevant to go back to your website? What's the purpose of doing that? So who's tweeting now on a regular basis? I know you are. I've seen yours. How are you tying it back to your website when you tweet? Are you? Or are you just kind of posting a sentiment? Yeah, let's look at Twitter first of all, because then we'll look at Facebook and so forth. And again, for those of you that were on Sunday, this is going to be a repeat for you. But Twitter is a really great tool if used correctly. It's a really useless tool when all you're doing is saying, we're doing this, hey, here's my thought on this, here's my thought on this. It's really rendered ineffective, except for that core group that might be following you. The purpose, or one of the purposes behind Twitter, is to drive more traffic to your website or wherever that central piece is of your hub, right? That's what it is for. That's really the better benefit for an organization or an individual, or for an organization or a business. For an individual, it's whatever you want. You're just telling your friends you're having that burger. But you want to be able to tie back your tweets to your website or another link. So for example, if you're going to comment on somebody else's comment or blog, you want to make sure you have a link back to that blog, whether you agree with it or not. If you disagree and you're being critical, you still want to have a link back to that particular blog. Why? Because the more links you have somehow coming back to you and your website, it increases your search engine optimization. It helps your website become more available every time you send out a tweet, if you do it right. How many of you include links when you're tweeting something? I know you do. You include links? What kind of links do you include? Okay, so when you put the links to the other websites, are you using the short link? Okay. Do you know what a short link is? Okay. So instead of putting in, if you were going to send somebody to my website through a tweet, you don't put in www.stevelowisz.com. What you do is go to one of the mini URL or bit.lys where you actually take that website, that URL, you plug it in and it gives you a short character. Some are 5, some are 7, some are 9. It gives you a different email, a web address. Okay? You plug that in because it's shorter. Think about putting in EuropeanLeadershipForum.com. How many letters or characters of your 140 did you just eat up? Now think if you're doing it in the Polish language where the words are even that much longer. Now you've got room for about 3 words. If you use the bit.ly or something along those lines, it compresses it. Here's the other important piece to understand about that. Google looks at that. Their search engine looks at that. If you're always linking back with your domain, www.stevelowisz.com, it sees that as chatter, it sees it as garbage and spam, and it drops your ranking when they're doing a Google search for you. If you use the bit.ly or something like that, Google has their own, it's goo.gl, it actually increases your search engine optimization so that you become more relevant. Why it does that, I have no clue. I can't tell you, and they may change it next month. But they've been doing this for about 3.5 years. So there's these little things that you've got to understand. The other piece is, some of us like to tweet often. And all throughout the day, yesterday, I probably had, I don't know, a dozen tweets or something up there. But I only did a link back to 2. Why? It's the same thing. If you put too many of those links, Google picks that up as chatter and drops your search engine optimization. So why? I can't answer that. That's not what I'm here for. But I'm here just to give you some of the tools, some of the techniques that you need to be using if you're going to be serious about what you're doing with some of these tools that are out there, Twitter, Facebook being the top 2. YouTube. How many of you use YouTube? I know you do. What do you use it for? Just to post your videos? Okay, so you're embedding it in your website. Okay, when you post your YouTube video at the bottom where you can put all the tags, are you using the tag feature? So that means these are the topics. So you can put as many as you want there. Why is that important? YouTube is the #1 catalog site in the world. It has more folders than any other site to be able to search. It's the #1 searched social media site today as well. So YouTube is absolutely phenomenal if you use it the right way. Again, link backs, and you can do all of that stuff through YouTube. But you got to understand the power of short videos. 30-second videos and less are getting the most views. 2 minutes and below are getting the second most. Anything over 2 minutes and you've completely lost somebody's attention, especially if you're dealing with the younger generation. So there's a lot of the videos, I've been looking at a lot of the Christian organizations that I've heard of here, and I'm looking at 30-minute and 60-minute videos, and they're from wonderful, wonderful people. Wonderful people. But the views are really, really low because people won't stay. 2 minutes or less, 30 seconds are best. I know you can't say a whole lot in 30 seconds, but if you're using YouTube to drive traffic, you get them in, and then you can give them the longer sessions or the longer sermons or whatever you're trying to do. But again, it's the tool is to get them in the door. Not a bait and switch. You're just having a shorter conversation about it. That's actually good, and that actually validates it, because if they're seekers, and he knows he's a seeker, and his friends are potentially seekers, they're going to be more apt to be able to see that. If they didn't even know that they were seekers, they would have never looked at it. And that's where you have the shorter one. So one is getting them in, and one is feeding them, if you want to look at it that way. I got to be careful I don't cross a line here with that.
It's kind of different levels.
Yeah, and that is what you did is a perfect example of the other things you should be doing. You should be seeking out other things to recommend, to comment, because it builds your trust when you're on social media. If it's just all of your own stuff, you actually start dropping your trust. So if every document you wrote, every sermon you did, and that's all you were recommending, they're all good, but if that's all you were recommending, you hurt your credibility. We all do. We want to go seek out other individuals, other posts, other topics, other videos, comment on it. This is where it starts to take time. So when you're figuring out if social media is something that you can do, one, do you have the website for it, again? Two, do you know the people you're trying to get and what they absolutely need? Three, are you willing to take the risk of either posting something you shouldn't and getting in trouble or the criticism from others? And four, do you have the time to do it consistent? Because if you're too inconsistent, now you want to be consistently inconsistent. Do you know what I mean by that? Yeah, consistently inconsistent means you're regular, but not on the same day or at the same time. You never want to be sending out tweets the exact same time, the exact same day. That's consistent. You want consistently inconsistent. Today it's at 8 a.m. Tomorrow it might be at 11 o'clock. Whatever it might be. And it doesn't need to necessarily be every day, especially blogs. Blogs are not made to be done every day. Unless you happen to be traveling and you're doing a log and people know they're coming to your site just for that. That's not for everyday comments. Use Twitter. But if you're going to really write something about a topic, a blog is a perfect place, and then get it out there on Twitter and Facebook and all those other tools. Yeah, because here's what's happened, and this has been studied since social media came out. If I subscribe to you, and I'm getting something from you every day at the same time, my tendency is to hit delete. If I get one on Monday, and maybe I'll get one Wednesday or Thursday, I kind of look at it with anticipation. I haven't gotten one in a couple of days. Boy, it'd be nice. And then when I get it, it's like, oh, let's see what the new stuff is. That's why. Because our natural tendency when we think it's close to garbage is delete or archive, depending on what you do. That answer your question? Yeah. And that's actually a big thing. They used, when we first started with one-way email blasts and so forth, it was like we have Constant Contact in the US that automates all of this stuff. They used to say consistently consistent. And it worked for about 30 days. And then companies were paying all this money and not getting any response. They went to consistently inconsistent, and they just about tripled the response rate. It's the same thing with anything that we're doing on social media. When you upload your YouTube video, the first thing you want to do is at the bottom, it'll give you the option to put in all the different tags. So if, I'm going to just pick on Lars again. If Lars is preaching about justification by faith or all of that, you take each of those terms and you put as many as you possibly can because that's what's being searched. In the future, what's going to happen with anything that's a video or a voice will be automatically transcribed, and you'll be able to search the content within each of those. That's almost here. That'll be something that's introduced in a very short period of time. Now talking about the ability to really get what you're looking for, and the power of YouTube will be unlike it's ever been, and it's already very powerful. Kids love YouTube, and everything's mobile. And YouTube works really, really well on a mobile. Well, that's a good point. You're saying Facebook has all kinds of noise?
Yeah.
YouTube has much more noise. Much more noise. And even though they police it a little bit, they're supposed to police it, we've all seen some of the garbage that's up on YouTube. So my only kind of philosophical, big picture thing on that was the more good stuff we could put up there, the more we can start fighting against it. And I don't see, those that are putting stuff up that's either irrelevant or completely against the word, they do a much better job of cataloging than we do. But hands down. So they're winning the war in social media. Keep that in mind. I hate to say that, but we can all improve by applying some of these things, which is absolutely critical. We just have one more minute? Okay. Okay, we'll make sure we have time for that. So again, a couple of things on Twitter. This is basic, but I just want to make sure we hit it. Retweeting, Lars, you already said that. This is big. But always look for other people's content that you agree with. Try to do that 4 to 1. So if you're going to put something negative, don't put any more than 1 out of every 4 that's going to be negative. And be careful about, obviously, I don't have to tell this audience, be careful about what you're putting even if it's negative. Always reply to your followers. So if you get a new follower, reply to them. Just kind of like Lufthansa did with me. Sometimes they'll send that on and say, hey, this person actually acknowledged the fact that I'm following them. They may send it on to somebody else, and you may get 2 followers out of it. It's one of those little things that they've checked for. Thank people. Anytime somebody retweets one of your tweets, you know you're notified of it. Thank them for it. Just like Lufthansa did. It's these little things that start increasing the base and the following and the trust level that you have. Ask questions. Big, 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 big. I mentioned this already earlier. Twitter's most effective. One, if you're commenting on something and you're making a recommendation, ask questions. Why would you want to ask a question? It's a call to action. If you can create even a minimal call to action, doesn't mean you're going to get a ton of responses, but the likelihood is you'll get more responses than if you just made a statement. If you're asking a question, ask a question and link back would be ideal. But again, no more than 2 link backs a day, even if you have 12 tweets that are actually going out. And we already talked about this, not just for announcements and so on. Facebook gets a little bit more crazy. Now, I don't know that for a fact. I'm making speculation, right? Because if you've got 90,000 followers and they're all commenting back to you, you would never be able to get back to them. There are some, and I don't recommend this, there are ways to automate, but now you're sending the exact same message to everybody who responds and they know it's automated. I wouldn't recommend that. That's a question you would ask. If there's something that's a personalized automation based on the content, not yet. But we got to be careful. Don't cross the line that our younger generation is, where they want to have all communication online through social media. I mean, somebody said this to me yesterday, and it was such a great point that I didn't think about. How do you disciple somebody online? When discipleship is supposed to be about a one-on-one relationship. I don't know the answer. I'm just posing the question. You'll see that as a tweet later, actually, that question. Something to debate, I think. Something to talk about. I'm not going to get into that. Facebook's very basic. You're already doing some of this. The thing with Facebook is it has so many features with polls and other things that you can utilize. It's specific to your organization. If you have specific questions and you'd like me to look at your Facebook page and give you recommendations free of charge, we're happy to do that at any point to any Christian organization. No cost to any of the consulting that we do for a Christian organization. So if you want some help and you want us to look at your social media and so forth, we're happy to take a look at it and you give you some thoughts and some recommendations on it. LinkedIn, you don't use as much. There is this thing called infographics, though. Do you know what an infographic is? It's painting a story with a picture. Infographics right now, aside from YouTube, are the #1 hit within blogs and social media. And this is an example, 2 examples of an infographic. It looks so busy, but people love this. It's just a bunch of information in a specific format. That's all it is. The younger group specifically, the 17 to about the 26 demographic, 27 demographic, absolutely love this because they're so visually oriented. So infographics, if that's something that you have the capability to create, if you have somebody that has the artistic ability to do that, one of our guys actually does these on a regular basis. It's getting all kinds of play. Again, 3 months from now, it may change. But there's a lot of interesting applications of doing something like this in the Christian community that I think would attract some of those younger individuals. YouTube, we already talked about. I'm going to skip some of this stuff since we're kind of running out of time here. I just want to give you perspective. This is one particular organization, and their website is actually at the center of this. But this will give you a sense of all the different things they're using on social media. They are even leveraging games because there's some things that they're doing with the game providers and so forth. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on. This is just one particular organization and all the different things they're doing and how they're trying to connect people on that outside ring. 80% of their efforts right now are on their mobile devices, smartphones, because that's where everything is going. And then the last, and I'll close with this. Social media in and of itself should be paired with traditional media. So when you go into a store and they have a big sign that says, like us on Facebook in their window in the store, that's actually combining offline and online. Getting the following, creating the trust and building the brand, it's difficult to do it 100% online unless you're an Amazon or a Google. Everybody else, if you're an organization, if you're, for example, if you're sending out literature to the members of your organization, you should have your Facebook, your Twitter, and everything down at the bottom. it starts to drive more people to the website to connect, so you actually have that information. Just kind of as a side note. One good example that I'll give you, this is an organization that almost went bankrupt. It's called River Pools. They're in the United States. They went to social media because they were having some issues. And they started a blog. They started kind of tweeting out. And then they happened to have, they make fiberglass pools. You know what a big fiberglass pool looks like? Instead of a concrete pool, they take this big fiberglass piece and they put it in the ground. And they got criticism because fiberglass can break when it's in the ground when you have all that earth pushing in on it. But through all their studies, it actually showed fiberglass will last longer than concrete because you don't have to do any of the maintenance on it. But they were getting ridiculed by their customers, past customers that had some issues with some of them. It was really one customer that just went crazy with negativity, and they got their friends to jump on, and then it got bigger, and it got bigger, and it got bigger, what happens an awful lot. But then they kind of took a negative and they made a positive. That's one of their pools that got flipped over when a hurricane came through or a tornado came through, because that's a trailer sitting on its side. Okay? They took a picture of this with this comment. Although the photo might confuse you at first, it's showing how strong this pool is because it got flipped over, nothing happened to it, it shows the strength of our pool. This went viral. They didn't know how to stop building, they couldn't build enough pools to keep up with the orders after this went viral. Simple little example of the power of this if it's actually done right. And then the rest I'll kind of skip through. I'll give you this so you can have it. Mobile apps for churches. Have you guys seen this? There's a ton. This is just a limit. There's about 270 mobile apps specifically to allow social media and other things. There was one interesting one, Foursquare. So it says ministers checking in on Foursquare. There's a guy in California that checks into the same Starbucks. Like Oz or somebody mentioned something similar to this not too long ago. He checks into California. He checks in that he's on Foursquare. He's got such a big following. They come to him, non-believers, in the Starbucks because they get to bend his ear for 15 or 20 minutes. So the power of stuff like this is there's a potential application for just about everything, depending on how big your imagination goes. Mobile is so important. Location-based services, that's like Foursquare. It tells you where it's at. I don't know the application for you yet, but just keep in mind where this is going. If you have your mobile phone and you have one that has the near-field communications on NFC, in the future, as you walk by a billboard, it will sense what's on your phone and it will change the advertisement on the billboard specifically to you. Think about that. That's where all of this is going. There's some aspects of that that can be applied directly to other social media tools as well. So just keep that in mind. We talk about a lot of this on the blog. If you want to follow us, if you want any of this information, all of these slides and the slides from Sunday are here at www.stevelowisz.com/ELF 2013. If I can be any assistance to any Christian organization, please let me know. Any questions, any thoughts? I hope it opened your eyes a little bit.